So let me begin, first of all, with the relationship between Greece and Brussels, Frankfurt with the ECB, Berlin, Germany being the most important here. How should they react to Syriza's demands that a big chunk of Greek debt should be written off?
I think we have to recognise that this is primarily, it's not a European crisis, it's a Greek crisis. And that Greek crisis has been going for quite some time. They messed up their economy beyond belief, and they have to get out of it themselves. And I think the reaction now throughout Europe is going to be to wait to see what the Greek government does. Because clearly the Syriza party has been elected on a platform that is unachievable. They have promised heaven to everyone, and they have promised that this should be paid by others. That is, to put it mildly, unlikely to happen. And I think they'll have to wait for a while and see when rhetoric meets reality for the Greek government, and then see if there's anything further that Europe can do in order to help.
There may not be much time, because the current bailout has been extended only to the end of February. At most, it could have a month's extra emergency extension. At that time, Greece has to pay back some money, particularly to the ECB, the European Central Bank. If it doesn't pay back that money, it becomes illegal for the European Central Bank to pump any more liquidity into the Greek banking system. It therefore goes bust.
Absolutely.
What happens then?
Well, that's a good question. Essentially, the Greek government is running out of money. And the Greek government will have to figure out how to handle that. What they are doing at the moment as we speak is to increase public expenditure rather dramatically, which means that they run out of money even faster. And their demand is, of course, that taxpayers and others in the rest of Europe are going to pay for this and bail them out. I look at sort of neighbouring country Finland.
But where an election is coming up.
Where an election is coming up.
Mr. Stubb.
Absolutely. And the Finnish economy is not in stellar shape, so they will have to be somewhat careful with public expenditure. Then go to the public electorate, or the Finnish electorate there, and say that, hi guys, we can't do very much more for you, but we need to spend more money for these Greeks who are doing less, is, to put it mildly, somewhat demanding as a campaign approach.
Particularly when he faces a challenge from the right, the hard right, rather the nasty right as well. So just before
my main point is really sort of the Greek government must get its own house in order. They must demonstrate primarily to the Greek electorate an economic policy that works. They can't expect the rest of Europe to sort out all of their problems.
Well, if, as it seems likely then, that Mrs. Merkel in particular is going to follow the line that you're taking, if you read her finance minister, Mr. Schäuble, you would take that as he would agree with everything you've just said. Is this not a time, therefore, if there are problems in what I could call the Club Med part of the Eurozone, don't the Germans need Britain as an ally more than ever? And therefore, aren't they, as a country that believes in the market, has supported deficit reduction and some austerity, don't they need it, and won't she therefore be more inclined to do things to keep us in?
I think not only Mrs. Merkel but others want Britain in on some of the big issues that are moving in Europe. Including Sweden. And if you look at the big issues that are moving in Europe today, they're moving very much along UK line. I mean, we have the digital single market, which is a very, very important thing for the competitiveness of Europe. We have the free trade talks with the US and India and others, which is very much something supported by the UK and Sweden and Germany and others. These are the big issues that needs to be moved forward during this year's and the coming years, and there London and Berlin and Stockholm and others are sort of key partners.
But isn't there also a sign that there are changes coming, and that could play to Mr. Cameron's agenda of change and renegotiation too? I mean, we've now seen that Mr. Sarkozy, who is likely, as I see it, unless he's in jail, of course, to be the next centre-right candidate in the French presidential elections. He's just gone to see Mrs. Merkel now. She still has a soft spot for him. He's saying that 50% of Europe's, of Brussels' power should be repatriated to the nation-states. That's music to Mr. Cameron's ears.
Yeah.
Though probably a different 50%.
It's unlikely to be the common agricultural policy if you listen to the French. It's likely to be something
But you get my point that Europe's in flux.
And Europe is always in a flux. Europe is always work in progress. But I take your main point, as a matter of fact, which I think is an important one, that a lot of these issues are moving since we are sitting in London, we can say that they're moving in a UK direction. In Sweden, I would say they're moving in a Swedish direction.
Let's hope no one's watching.
No, but it's same.
They
same
do watch
thing.
in Sweden.
I mean, the free trade, the single market, the anti-bureaucracy, those sorts of issues, call them reform issues. Then there are some other tricky issues that need to be sorted out. But I'm fairly optimistic that it would be possible to move the agenda forward on this.
Is Mr. Cameron right, in your view, to attempt a major renegotiation of our terms of membership?
Well, reform we are all interested in. Call it renegotiation if you want to. That's very popular in the UK. I would call it reform.
Wouldn't that involve treaty change as well, though, which is a big issue?
I think treaty change is going to be very, very difficult. And I'm not quite certain that you need treaty change to do a number of these things. All of the things that we've been discussing here, they don't need treaty change.
You don't think they need treaty change?
No, not these things that we discuss here. If you go to things that have been subject to debate here, the free movement of people and things like that, yeah. That requires treaty change, and I don't think that's going to work.
Let me finish with one final, broader question about you. You look at the Syriza forming a government in Athens, the rise of Podemos, which just came from nowhere in Spain a year ago, now the largest party on the left. The National Front, the hard right, now the largest party in France, according to the opinion polls. Even in Germany, the rise of the Alliance for Deutschland, a Eurosceptic party against the euro but not against EU membership. Even in your own cuddly, Euro-friendly Swedish social democratic state, the rise of a hard right nativist Sweden Democrat Party. This is all a challenge to the European elite of the centre-left and the centre-right, of which you're a quintessential part.
Absolutely. If you take the situation all over Europe, I think what we see is that there's a crisis for the big political parties that have been dominating during a lot of what we can call post-war period. They are significantly smaller now than they used to be. I mean, the Social Democratic Party, the PASOK party, which used to dominate Greece for decades, has virtually
almost gone.
Ceased to exist.
It's like Labour disappearing in Britain.
Well, yeah.
But I'm not saying that's going to happen. What I'm saying is the equivalent of Labour disappearing.
Absolutely. But I mean, wherever, the Swedish Social Democratic Party ain't that big any longer. The Austrian Social Democratic Party the same. Christian Democrats. So we see sort of the European political landscapes fracturing somewhat more. You see it in this country as well, by the way.
Indeed, you do.
And that's a challenge, how to manage that.
Well,
we are getting more. It's also a reflection of the fact that our societies are getting less homogeneous and more diversified. Indeed. So some of this reflects changes in our society that are not necessarily bad.
You need to come back more and tell us about this. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. We've known each other since university days.
And, I remember not that long ago.
We're talking a couple of years ago, John. And when I was working in Washington, he called me once to say, I'm coming in tomorrow night, could we have dinner? And I said, thanks very much, you haven't given me much notice. What are you doing these days? And he said, I'm Prime Minister of Sweden. So I said, I guess we'll be having dinner.